Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, Chris Roberts answers the most upvoted question. Pyro is looking pretty incredible, plus we see the next step in planetary homesteads. So before we begin, I would just like to say a huge thank you to my new patrons, Nick Laren, Deathfire, and Captain Jax, who is also a channel member. Thank you both for all the support. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, Chris Roberts requested a question from us that he would answer. The most upvoted question was, how is the dynamic economy shaping up, and is server meshing an essential requirement before quantas show up? So I will briefly go over what was said here, but I will dive further into this later in the week in a more dedicated video. So if you don't know what the dynamic economy or quantum is, I have linked a couple of videos below which explain this and how they will work in Star Citizen's PU. Tony Zurvek, one of the devs behind the quantum system, has been spending a lot of his time this year fleshing out the internal infrastructure of the dynamic economy and universe simulation. What he has been doing is increasing data flow from the dedicated servers, or the DGS, to quantum, linking the various game services. These are specific services for things like shops, commodities, resources, encounters like probability volumes and AI spawns, and service beacons that any dedicated game server can query to get the global state of the universe, reading state from back-end databases like the persistent database, which will soon become the iCache, to track players' states and assets, improving quanta ability for their traits and proficiencies to drive their actions and occupations, quanta being the representation of a group of AI in the verse simulation, and improving the star map and player analytics so we can have a full view of the player's activities like travel, combat, and purchases, and so on. Now, the demo we saw from last year's CitizenCon demonstrated the high-level simulation approach they are planning to take, but much of the plumbing, as Chris Roberts puts it, wasn't in, so the work on that has been happening to link it back to gameplay so that we can see the cause and effect that the dynamic universe will bring. Over the next couple of quarters, the team will be further fleshing out quanta behaviours like tourists, entertainers, blue and white collar workers, and so on, and continuing to link the overall simulation to the services, which will then allow it to drive things in the game, including the upcoming dynamic mission system. The first iteration of pricing being driven by the back-end simulation will likely apply to fuel and repair costs first, and then from there it'll push more of the quantum simulation like encounters, commodity and retail goods pricing and stock, resource persistence like mineable assets, and allowing them to drive gameplay in the various dedicated game servers. So Tony Zurvek's goal is to have elements of the dynamic universe start to come online, likely towards the back end of next year, where players' actions can impact both the dynamic economy and other players. As it says, this is a goal, this isn't a promise, so hopefully they can get to that. But as I say, I will work on a more dedicated video going deeper into this, the plan, what it means and what we will see, so do keep an eye out for that and hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss out on that one. But as far as how it's going, it's nice to hear that a lot of the work has progressed on it since we first saw it at CitizenCon last year. It was a very impressive system that pretty much stole the show. It obviously requires a lot more work still and is slowly getting hooked up to more systems. It is a shame that it isn't coming sooner than the latter half of next year, but I'm sure it will be worth the wait. On a side note, Chris Roberts did talk about things like localization, like Chinese and Russian localization, which I can't imagine affects many of my community, but they have hired a localization manager in the UK to start focusing on Squadron 42 and Star Citizen, and are interested in working on foreign translations with the community, especially on Star Citizen, which is a huge ongoing project. He says the main reason for the lack of translations was due to the lack of dedicated personnel, which has now been rectified, so do expect to see more on this front going forwards. So it was good to catch up on all that. It would be nice for Chris Roberts to spend some more time answering a few more questions, but I would just prefer him to focus on building the best damn universe sim in the verse, but that is just my opinion. Anyway, with that said, let us move on. So on this week's Inside Star Citizen, it kicked off looking at the new player and external inventory management system. This is coming in 3.11, and we will be able to interact with an inventory other than our own for the first time, and also introduce a new inventory user interface. To access, you can either go to the personal inner thought wheel and then click on the inventory slot, or press the keybind, which is Y, to bring up the inventory screen. And you'll see on the left hand side all of the inventory containers the player has equipped, like your chest or leg armor and a backpack. From here, the player can see the capacity of each container and can access all the inventory with options to drag and drop between all containers, stack items of the same type. You can split items and access the item's contextual menu, like eating, drinking, or dropping. This is all thanks to the building blocks UI tech, which really helps, but currently they are not happy with the hollow shader for each object, as it doesn't show enough detail, so they are working to improve that. With this update, you can access an external inventory of a vehicle as well, and I think it's just the Greycat ROC storage. The intention is for us to interact with inventories outside of our own character, so not just the ROC eventually, it'll be for the future things like looting and taking other people's stuff, which I am very excited for. Anyway, from here we had a sprint report. We first looked at the refinery decks, which are currently in the grey box phase, and the team are just completing a sprint on world building, which is where the artists go through and just set dress the locations with appropriate assets and request any remaining assets that they might need from props. They also redesigned the smelter drums, which if you remember before they looked like this, they are now much better. I think they look a lot more interesting and a bit more futuristic. For 3.11 on the roadmap, there were some new location features which are updating the geology and ground textures, which can be seen here. This is Daymar, and they are updating the rock sets, removing all the potato-looking rocks while converting the new rocks to use the new organic shader to look and feel a lot more natural than before. Now, I am very much liking these new designs, and I really hope this also means they are removing all of the scattered rocks around so we can go a lot faster on our speeders, because they have up the speed of them, but we still bump into rocks. We also got to see new surface scans, which increases the detail, and once repainted, they will then comb over all of the terrain to ensure the blending looks right. Personally, I think it does look a lot better than it used to. Next up, we got to see the latest on Pyro, which is looking incredible. They were exploring one of Pyro's moons, which is orbiting Pyro 5, which is the gas giant, and actually the only planet in Pyro system with moons. They are currently exploring to see how far they can push the current tech and asset packs before anyone creates anything new. They also felt it looked too much like a red Daymar, so the second pass was to give a bit more of a dry, crumbly feel to its surface, as well as adding a few new additions to the asset library. Once the new painting tool improvements have had their trial run on existing moons and planets in Stanton, they will then return to this moon and just push it in new and different ways, I suppose kind of like a test bed for experimenting maybe. And finally, we got to see the current exciting progress on Homesteads. These are frontier housing to be found out in the wilderness areas of undeveloped planets and moons. The next step, they said, was taking these 2D sketches which we saw recently into 3D sketches in Blender to further explore the shape language, see them a little bit in situ and build out a lot of kit bash options for them to play with. They're also considering what materials went into making these structures so that they make logical sense and are sourced from the minerals that are available on the planet or in the location they're at, which I do like. They're also designing them for future plans to use the resource generation and item control system, with each building needing power and lighting and so on. Now, I really love all of this. This is what makes Star Citizen so great. They really think about those finer details just to add that extra level of depth. I also like how they're all different types for different purposes, like your solar and wind power generators or your liquid storage units and so on. These are going to be epic, so do expect a video in the near future from me just talking further about these and about base building and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that was Inside Star Citizen. What a great episode, let's move on. So this week's Star Citizen Live was with the members of the builds, platforms and publishers teams to talk about the process involved in how builds are created and maintained, platform data systems and how they test for stability and so on. A lot of it was very technical, so I only kept in some questions. If you are into that sort of technical side of things, like what servers they use and so on, I highly suggest giving it a watch yourself. First question is, what's the process of building and maintaining a build from the dev branch? And they actually maintain dozens of dev builds internally, each one used for different purposes. Once a feature is completed, they are merged with the builds, and then they get tested by QA to see how they play together before integrating it with a release branch. They have a robust inclusions process that allows them to strip patches down to ensure only things that should be included get included when they are ready. Next question is, how do you test and benchmark systems for stability? Now, they said they have multiple ways. On the platform side, they have a set of tools which allows them to simulate thousands and thousands of users doing all crazy sorts of things that they can do to see the results. They also have a system that can test specific scenarios to simulate maybe many players all doing the same thing. And then they have automated systems to test game server performance. So quite a bit. How long does a game build usually take to compile? And they said about 3 to 4 hours. Is the issue council directly linked to the internal Jira? And they say yes, Jira being their task and sort of project tracking and management system. And they said yes, they can be auto-imported into the CIG's Jira and then set as a task for an appropriate dev to take on. If you see a CIG eye on the report on the issue council, it means that it is now in the internal Jira. And then the final question that I included is, will iCache and global persistence change how long-term persistence is handled? And they said not really. Long-term persistence was engineered to persist your data between patches. The state of the objects like damage or the location it's stored and so on in the persistence system is what iCache will bring, so it kind of allows for more state tracking. Anyway, that was all I included there. As I say, if you are interested in learning more about their sort of back-end stuff, nothing about really iCache server meshing, it's not that kind of things, more just about how they deploy builds, what goes into it, and how they track these things, then do give it a watch. All the links are below. So also this week, the latest lore post spoke to Imperator candidate Leilani Addison. Plus, to celebrate International Talk Like a Pirate Day, if you win your way through the Arena Commander Pirate Swarm, you can unlock the option to buy the Pirate Caterpillar or Gladius, or both with the Aggressor pack. Also available is a Pirate Day 2020 Drake Buccaneer and F7CM Super Hornet. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.